I'm actually from Victoria, but I grew up in Tasmania on a farm in the north. So I'm just going to give a bit of a sort of rundown on my Nuffield Scholarship travels over the last 18 months that I've been embarking on, and a little bit of a practical guide to my skills and my experiences that I've found from exporting the fresh vegetables, mainly asparagus, in the last 7 years. So just a short bit of a background. I think everyone knows, and it's been well said at this conference, that by 2050 the world population is going to exceed 9 billion people. Asia is the fastest growing continent in the world and has around 60% of the world's population. So tapping into that for us here in Australia is going to be an extreme part of our future in the vegetable industry, and something that we really need to address as a whole industry. The vegetable sector is extremely fast-paced and dynamic. Consumers are driving change, and all of us have to continually address and monitor our businesses to be able to keep up with the needs of the ever-changing consumer. And that's one point that I really found on my Nuffield Scholarship travels. So Australia's geographic location, we're perfectly positioned in the southern hemisphere. We cover a range of climatic conditions, from cold Tasmania or cold right through Mediterranean in the Mildura area in the centre of Australia, up to tropical production regions in the north of Australia, which perfectly exhibits us to be able to produce any range of products that we might ever want to consider, or if a market is requiring something. Being on the same time zone is extremely important. Doing business with communication these days, it needs to be fast-paced, it needs to happen quickly and regularly, and we often find with our asparagus exports that people demand information as quickly as we can get it, and obviously being on the same time, or virtually the same time zone, 1 to 2 hours in front of the major markets situated there in Asia, gives us a good competitive advantage against other countries. So my Nuffield Scholarship, which I've embarked on for the last 18 months, has been an unbelievable experience, and I would encourage anyone to ever consider, if you think you don't have the time, it's a good thing overall for your business if you can somehow get away from your business to embark on the travels for 16 weeks. It is a big commitment, but well worth the experience. So when I applied for the scholarship, I didn't really have too much of an idea of what I would find or what I would see. I had one key objective, that I was concerned for the economic sustainability of vegetable farming. Many growers were suggesting to me that there weren't, the economic returns weren't there and the opportunities weren't available for people. So that was what I set out to achieve. So the first part of my travel was to gain a holistic understanding of what's happening in the world of horticultural trade. So I visited South America, Chile, Ecuador and Argentina. I visited the USA, I visited New Zealand, and I visited numerous farms in Australia to try and get an understanding of our competition and from other countries. And then I visited all of the major markets in the Asian region which we supply to, so Japan, Taiwan, Korea, China, India, Singapore, Hong Kong and Malaysia, trying to get an understanding of what's actually happening in their markets, and where the consumers are driving us to be in the future. So the three key opportunities that I took out of the whole process and learning experience from my travels were post-harvest opportunities. So in that I'm talking everything literally from harvest right through until consumer, as in shelf life opportunities and packaging opportunities and different marketing there. And a lot of that comes from, with the post-harvest, then moves into export opportunities. Taking the meat example today was fantastic. Taking product away from the domestic market obviously increases grower returns, and that's what everyone's here for. And then the third and probably the most important thing that I established is transparency and communication in the supply chain. So if I use an analogy of a chain, if it's 10 links long, it doesn't matter if it's 10 or 20. If you add more links to your supply chain, it's fine as long as every link is important and communication is going up and down the links in the chain. And if any one of those chains break down, doesn't matter whether it's from your own business or your partners or relationships overseas, then the whole process is not going to work as efficiently as it probably should. So moving on to actually export and my experience from exporting into Asia, it's very important first and foremost to understand the culture and understand that every country is different and has a different set of requirements before you can send your product there. So to develop long-term relationships, not just a one-off business, Momac produce, I've only been doing it for 7 years, but has been successfully doing it into Asia for over 25 years, which is a sign that they're doing things very well. So every country is different, but as a whole, I think no matter where you are in Asia or any country that we might like to try and sell our product to, respect, honesty, and integrity are very important to understand and to develop a trusting relationship with your supplier or your importer or your partner in the inbound country. So like I touched on before, having transparency in that process is extremely important. And one more thing, in Asian cultures, developing friendships before business is also vital for the success of the long-term business. Because in Asia, a lot of the cultures rely on having like their work being their whole life, and their social experiences revolves around their life, revolves around their work. So if you don't fit into that culture, then it's unlikely that it's going to be success. So I also go to so I'm trying to learn about the further steps in the supply chain when I visit overseas. So the first photo of me on the left there is one of my customers in Taiwan. So I go to him to learn about their process and what they're actually doing and how they're using our product when it's there. So that's not our asparagus, but that's a Thailand asparagus that's in their market, and I'm looking at them there repackaging and understanding what they're actually doing, which is important. So just a short slide here on the asparagus supply chain, and I would encourage any grower or producer out there to actually sit back and determine all of your steps in your supply chain and what could be improved, and are there any efficiencies that could be gained. So for us, you can follow it through with the arrows. The first is the asparagus unharvested in the field. Then it goes into a field crate, onto a wash belt, through an optical sorting line, packaged into a wooden box that we use for export. There's the storage and dispatch. We're doing a quality assurance check there before dispatch. And then it's loaded at the airport, and you can see that's at our freight forwarder's location with the pallets all foiled up and netted up, ready to go onto a plane. And then there's the product being lodged onto a plane. And then the final one is a bit of a summary of about any number of steps that could be into that process with the asparagus being sold to the consumer in Japan. So I did it that way purposefully because that might change depending on your relationship with that importer. At times, you might allow them to do the repackaging for you because the country or the importing country may have cheaper labour, where the labour component is very high, and we're utilising that a lot with our asparagus. There's also other packaging that might happen, but depending on where it's going, whether it has to be trucked to further destinations within the host country, and so on and so forth. But I can't stress it enough from my experience in the travel and meeting with importers and discussing with people all over the world, that understanding all of the steps in the supply chain right through to the consumer and understanding what the consumer wants is very important. So now this is a short slide on exchange rate and understanding of it. It's very simple, but I don't think everyone fully understands what it is. If we're selling in Japan, the consumer doesn't really care what the Australian exchange rate is at all. They're looking for a price point of, say with asparagus, it might be 158 yen per 100 gram bunch. So to achieve that, we know we've got to be on a 500 yen sale overseas. And if you look at this graph, it's from 2011 to the 12th of June when I did the slide, and the variation within that range goes from a low of 74.7 in early 2011 to 103.7 in 2013. This slide tells me two things: that you can't be 100% reliant on export market for your product. You have to be able to have a range of markets available, whether it's a range of export markets and still your existing markets here in Australia. Because if you look at then the calculation based off the low and the high exchange rate at the same selling point, which is the same price point in Japan, there's $1.84 per kilo difference. And fundamentally, the costs don't change whether you're selling at 500 yen and 103 exchange rate or 500 yen and 74.7 exchange rate, but there's $1.84 difference to the end price back in Australian dollars. And just also worth noting the volatility and how hard it is to manage the risk. On Friday, when there was the referendum and the vote in the UK, the exchange rate, the Japanese yen went from above 81 to below 74 in the space of about 6 hours. So it's pretty hard to manage if you were actually trading on that day. It's pretty hard to get grower pricing and everything right. But then once again, it's important that if you're the exporter or you're managing that on behalf of growers, to be open and communicate it through to the growers, and so they are understanding of what's going on and the price differential, what exchange rate will create. So this was touched on before, and Mark spoke a lot about different images and packaging options that are available. And when you travel around the world, there are many different styles of markets and opportunities available to buy products. So if you look at the photo on the left, that's a Japanese melon being sold for 10,000 yen, which right now is about $135. So it's a lot of money for one melon. Then there's 3 onions in a net, that's also in Japan. The next photo is a tray of tomatoes as a gift pack for around 65 Australian dollars. And the final photo is the traditional sort of market style where there's no packaging at all. But once again, it's an individual, each market's unique, and understanding what that market requirement is important. So then my points on post-harvest here are cold chain management throughout the supply chain to maximise the selling period for the importer. So if they have longer to sell the product, you're likely to take out price fluctuations. Marketing of the product, actually having your own brand in market is important, like Mark was touching on. It's also important that if you're exporting and you're that person with the knowledge and the know-how to understand all of the air and the sea freight logistic routes and the costs that are associated with that, Australia is in a perfect position to capitalise on the Asian market given its proximity to Asia and also the frequency of flights because of the number of tourists that are coming in and out of here. From Melbourne to Singapore, there's 6 flights daily, and on 2 days of the week I think there's 7 flights daily, so it's an unbelievable amount of passengers, and that equates to a lot of freight that's going in and out of Melbourne, Singapore, and then Singapore opens you up to the rest of Asia, if not the world. So going on to shelf life opportunities, and a lot of that comes from the cold chain management in the process. Obviously, a lot of growers in the room, everyone knows that production's never going to be 100% stable with a perishable product, so if you can try and extend shelf life and manage your selling program to reduce those fluctuations in supply, it gives your customers a lot more consistency, and it makes the whole process and the whole supply chain more efficient. Value adding, whether that be in your own country or with your own product back on farm, or with a third party value adder, or in the country of export value adding. We're doing a little bit of all of those 3 and all proving to be successful. Once again, it's understanding of what's happening in the process, if it's making it more efficient, if it's assisting you with adding value and opportunities for more space on supermarket shelf, etc. So now I've just got a bit of a summary of what I've sort of been talking about. So in my view, the key priorities for successful export are having a product differentiation, whether that be against your own country or, more importantly, against neighbouring countries that may be in competition with you at the same time of year. For us, we're competing against Peru and Mexico with our asparagus, and generally speaking, they're cheaper, but we've got a higher quality product, so we need to make sure that that's recognised in the market and our consumers, or the consumer education is there. So having quality and consistent supply is really important in achieving that. Understand what the customer wants. So spend time with him, spend time in the supermarkets. I think it was touched on before with Jim Trandos going to countries overseas and wandering supermarkets and learning what other packaging is there and learning what other products are available. I think Australia can really leverage against the clean and green image and marketing as a whole. New Zealand do it very well. You go there and you go to any trade shows around the world and they have really good banners and they have a lot of branding on the New Zealand Pure. It's important to understand the seasonal availability of products, so whether it be asparagus is a seasonal product, but even say broccoli, for example, there are certain times where it grows better than it does at other times of year. In Japan, their main production is in their summer period right up in the north, so in the winter time that creates an opportunity for Australia. Number of SKUs available, so for example with asparagus, if you can produce 3 or 4 different products out of the same using packaging or bunch sizes or different labelling, you can actually create then a consumer to have a choice of a product of asparagus rather than choosing between asparagus and a different vegetable line. So because you're getting more supermarket space, you're in the eyes of the consumer a lot more. touched on it before, but it's important to still have domestic market options available if the exchange rate changes or if there's a major issue in the inbound market. And most importantly, in my view, is everything has to relate back to the grower. Will the grower make money? Is it going to be sustainable in the long term? So grower, exporter, importer transparency. I think the key thing from my Nuffield Scholarship and my main recommendation in my report is that relationships and transparency throughout the supply chain drive success. So communication on all links to the chain and up and down flow, and everyone's on the same level and understanding of what's happening in the process. So growers focus on growers, packers focus on packing, specialised knowledge base required for each process. Whether people need to go to a third party to export their product, whether people need to get in external consulting advice to set up and structure their product and get new brands involved, they're all the things that people should be considering for better grower returns in the future. I've saw it on numerous occasions, grower cooperation, so that then they're working together as a country to export their product rather than working individually and competing against their neighbour into the same markets. And there were some really good examples of that happening in the US. I think everyone knows the free trade agreements are now starting to really take and have an influence on Australian exports, Brussels sprouts into Korea being probably the fairly obvious one from the last couple of years. And another thing that's going to be big in the future for vegetables, it's already starting to happen with fruit, is online sales. In China, I've had numerous meetings with buyers over there who are really interested in starting to promote Australian product with online sales. And that's very special, very high-end market and opportunity for really good grower returns. So that's all I have for today. Thank you, everyone.